Hello everyone and welcome to another tutorial. Today I am doing a full dry run of how to fully port a Warframe from Warframe into Unity for VRChat. The first thing you're going to need to download is the Unity package in the description. That Unity package has instructions for, well, I don't know if the instructions are actually in there, but they'll be in the description. The first thing you're going to need to install is, well, obviously first, all the VRChat stuff that you're going to need, but you're also going to need the shader package Rero. It should be in my description, but if it's not in there, you can find it by just Googling Rero Unity shader. And then you're going to want to install the shader I am using, which is a custom modded shader of Rero. Right now you can see it right here. It looks atrocious because I don't have shader GUI, but this is the shader we'll use on the Unity side. So the reason I'm going over this first is in that package, I have an already fully VRChat ready Excalibur. So this has the rig that we are going to use as our base. So that's why I tell you to install that first, so we can get the FBX rig from him later. The next thing we're going to do is we are actually going to extract this from the game. This extractor is safe, to my knowledge, as long as the game is not currently running. So we are not going to need levels, so we can make sure all that's unchecked. We will need texture. I recommend using PNG. You can use TGA. I don't recommend DDS for this. Yep, we have everything we need, so we can go ahead and say load. If you have any problems loading up the extractor, those questions can be answered in the Warframe extraction Discord. So for today's tutorial, we're going to be porting Saren. So this is Warframes directories. So for Warframes, we can find Warframes under Lotus, Characters, and then Tenno. This has all the different Warframes, and a word of warning, not every Warframe is named the exact same as what they are in-game. For example, Saren here is called Medusa. So this is her file directory. Just recently, the extractor got a search feature, so if you're trying to find someone with a weird name like Jade, you can just search Jade up here, and then we can collapse everything that does not relate to the Tenno directory. Don't need any new more, don't need Oricon, don't need Sentient. Because I chose Jade, there's a lot of junk. And we don't need armor accessories because we're looking for a character. That's something unrelated. Okay, that didn't work. I know Jade's name. Jade's name is Choir. I spelled that wrong. No. Yeah. Yeah, so this is Jade. Okay, that's why I couldn't find her, because not a single thing is named Jade. So yeah, you can see sometimes you'll have to search a bit for it, but the number one way to look for what you're trying to get is actually looking at the models. You can see here, it's clearly Jade's model. The reason I chose Jade specifically is I just knew her stuff was named differently. But you can see here it's her body, and then I know Choir is Jade's name. But today we're doing Saren, so if I were to search Saren, you can see Saren Prime pops up under Medusa. But while I'm under the search feature, I can't see the base stuff, so I'm just going to clear search, and I can go under Medusa. So the first thing to look at is this cloth directory. See, Saren Prime has some cloth under there. I'm not going to cover cloth in this because it's a whole thing. As we can see, Medusa does not have any, well, Medusa Saren does not have any cloth other than for her deluxe skin. So we're just going to get her base texture here. Hit extract. And you'll have to set up all your extraction settings, but we're just going to get everything labeled Medusa. And the material is important. This is a lot that seems unimportant, but we're going to use this to replicate all her settings one-to-one. And I'm doing a dry run so I can make sure every single little thing that I might not think about gets covered. These are all deluxe. We don't need those. Here's her helmet. Helmet textures. And then her pack maps. Alright, and that should be everything for her. So now that we're jumped over to her file directory, you see we have these GLB files. These are the model files. So we're going to need Blender now. So I'm going to go over some stuff settings-wise that will help us out. So if we go under our Edit and we go under Preferences, we're going to want to go under System. And then under System, there's these different settings. If you're running a non-RTX GPU, you're going to want to use CUDA. If you're running a AMD GPU, you're going to want to run HIP, and then Open APIs for if you're running Intel GPU. OpticX is if you have the RTX GPU, and that's what I use. These different settings basically are just different configurations for different hardware that can make it run way better. Running none will be significantly slower. I know we're not rendering in this, but we are going to be baking, and baking uses cycles. So we are going to need cycles configured to the best of our ability. So now that we have Blender, we are going to need to import our model. So now that we have Blender already, we're going to need our model. So let's pull up our directory here, and we're going to take Medusa helmet, Medusa body, and then we're going to just drop those in. We don't need to pack the images. We're just going to hit import. So now this is imported. So we're going to hide our skeletons, because first we need to address some issues with the model. The number one thing about the models with the current version of the extractor is if we go over to this drop down and hit face orientation, it's all red. We want this to be blue, so we're going to select Medusa body and helmet, and then we're going to hit tab to go into edit mode. You can see it jumped around. We'll fix that in a second, but right now we're just going to go on our keyboard and hit Alt, in, flip, and then we can hit tab to exit out of edit mode. And now we have fixed the issue of it being the wrong face orientation. And then we can right click and hit shade smooth. We can turn this off. So now that we have our faces the correct way, you saw when we go into edit mode right now, our thing jumps around. To fix that, we're going to go under our modifiers tab. And under our armature, we're just going to hit this drop down and hit apply. And for Saren specifically, we no longer need these skeletons anymore. So I can go ahead and delete these. For certain ones where you're dealing with cloth, you're going to have to do some more editing. Since Saren is pretty basic in her rigging, we're not going to need that. So now what we're going to do is the helmet. Usually Warframe's helmets are just the helmet bone, but if we go under our data properties right now, you can see we have a ton of different bones right now that we do not need. So what we're going to do right now to get rid of what we don't need, we're going to go under weight paint, and then we're going to see is head the only thing. Yep, so the head bone is the only bone being used for a helmet, so I'm going to hit lock on that. Hit this drop down, and then hit delete all unlock groups. And that can go ahead and unlock it. So now for the helmet, we've cleaned it up to where we just have the helmet. And now we're going to do the body. The body has a lot of junk that we do not need for this. So right now you can see this is unneeded. A lot of this stuff is unneeded. So I'm just going to go through and remove what's not showing up. And on most newer Warframes, when they extract, everything that's not used will be under this root. See, if I go above this root, you can see we're immediately using a bone. But you have to be careful, because that is not always the case. So now this is using everything. And then for organization, I like to move the spine bones up with the hip, because we're going to be editing those a bit later, and that just makes it easier to work with. Now I'm going to find the neck bones. And yes, that is plural. Warframe has 2 neck bones. And VRChat does not support that, so that's something we're going to need to fix in a bit here. You don't have to do this stuff, but I promise you it'll help you in the next step. Okay, so now that I have my head, neck, and all my spine stuff here, I can get into making sure it actually works with the rig we're going to use. But first, we need the rig we're going to use. So we can actually, I'm pretty sure now with Blender, just open up Unity, get Excalibur's FBX, and drag this in. Yep, it looks like that's going to work. Blender added drag and drop a little bit ago, so that was a very helpful thing that I just makes everything easier. Yep, so now we have a rig we're going to use. We can go ahead and delete Excalibur himself. And then I like to rename this to just WF for Warframe rig. And then we'll call this Sarah. Hopefully I spelled her name right. I apologize if I spell anything wrong. Yep, so now we have our rig. So what we can go ahead and do is we can hit A while our rig is selected, and then we can do Control P, Armature Deform. So this rig is the rig I use on all my avatars. It has the spine repositioned and the hips repositioned to be more VRChat friendly. This is the rig I prefer. This is the rig I use. So you can use this as your base. If you're adding any claw physics, you can just add them to the parents of this. So what we need to do now is make sure our body has the appropriate amount of spine bones, because currently we have 2 or 3 extra spine bones. So what we're going to do, first let's drag these into the collection. There we go, just for organization. So I'm going to duplicate the body. And then I'm going to go under the original body. And what we're going to delete is neck 2, spine 4, spine 2. And then what we're going to do is select the duplication of the body. We're going to then under that select neck 2. And then we're going to hold Control and select our base body. And then select neck 1. Then we're going to go under weight paint. And we're going to do weights, transfer. And then we're going to open this up and switch from nearest vertex to topology. Normally this won't matter, but that will make sure we don't get any kind of extra stuff getting in there where we don't want it. So next we're going to switch from replace to add. So now we have combined our neck bones. So now we deleted spine 4, so we're going to select spine 3, go out of weight paint mode, go back to our duplicated body, select spine 4, Control select, and then we already set up our settings to weight transfer, so we're just going to weight transfer again. And then we're going to hit spine 1. Back here, spine 2, and transfer weights. And now we can delete the duplication of our body. And if you want, I like to then combine the head with the body. And now we can test it very simply by going under our rig, going pose, and just grabbing the hip. If you set something up wrong or you missed a bone, usually it will stretch around when you do this. But right here, it looks like everything... Oh, that's because I hit G instead of R. Yeah, okay. Looks like everything is configured right. So we are now done with the rigging phase. And I have not saved yet. So I am going to go ahead and do that. Okay, so now that we've saved everything and we have our rig done, we're going to move over to shading. Actually, before we move over to shading, we're going to cover how to fix these seams. With some Warframes, you're actually going to still want them, It's a very specific case, but some of the Warframes have their normal maps connecting and fixing this. I'm pretty sure Saren does not. So what we're going to do under our modifiers tab is add a weld modifier. And we're going to set this to point like 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. We want it very precise. Okay, that was too much. Basically, we want it to where just before Blender zeroes it out. And that cleans that up. And then we're going to want to add a weighted normal. We're going to want that to be face and angle. And we want our rig modifier at the bottom. So that cleaned that up pretty nice. So now we're going to go under our shading. So now that we are in our shading tab, we are going to want to first switch this tab to a text editor, which seems weird, but you'll see why in a second. And now we're going to want to open up what editing is. So we're going to want to find our material file, which is a text document right now. So we're going to do her body. I import it twice, so Blender formats it. Makes it easier to read. And then the key thing we want to look for here is this, which shader it's using. So Saren here is using PBR Fill Deferred. That's quite an easy one to use. So that means we are going to have to get that shader. In the Warframe archive Discord under archive upload, at the top you can find the link to this file. And under useful resources, and then Blender resources, we can find, I can't remember who made it, I think, yeah. Okay, so under here, you can find all the different shaders that Warframe uses, and these are for Blender. So you can find and download that, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go under to File, up in the pinned, and as you can see under here, I already have quite a few Warframe files. So I'm just going to choose Excalibur. And then under Node Tree, you're going to want to do this to the shader blend file that you downloaded. And we are going to find PBR Fill Deferred. And then, yeah, okay. So we're going to pin that. And then what we're going to do is, I like to turn on this little snap thing that makes sure everything stays on a grid. And I almost forgot about something. One thing you're going to want to make sure is under File, Edit Preferences, and then Add-ons, you're going to want to make sure Node Wrangler is enabled. So under your preferences, you're going to want to make sure the add-on Node Wrangler is enabled. I forgot to mention that. And once you have that enabled, we can do Shift A, search PBR Fill Deferred, and here's the shader. So this particular shader, you can see, has a few outputs. What we're going to want to do is, I prefer to always set this to 0.5, just to 0, and then this to 0.5. You don't have to do that. I used to do that so when it imports to Unity, I kind of know that it's not a setup material. And then we're going to plug in our base color, our metallic, our roughness, and then our normal we can't plug in yet, and I'll show you why. If we put this to the output, it's using like an actual normal map output right now, which is helpful for later, but right now it's not using that for, well, okay. We can't plug these in. If we do, it does this. Which clearly is not what we want. So what we're missing here is a normal... my spelling is atrocious today. We need a normal map node, and then we can just plop that in there. And then our normals are fixed. Ignore the green right now. That is not important to what we're doing right now. So... yeah, all that looks like what we're going to need. So now, we get to start importing stuff now. Let's import our normal map. Oh, wait, sorry. Let me go over this first. So under this material file, if you scroll down, you can find where all the textures are coming from. So we can see right now our normal map is Medusa normal map. Well, Medusa _in, which is right here. And normal maps we set to non-color. And then we can plug that in there. And then we have our normal map. Ambient occlusion, we're going to want to make sure is off. We are not using that in that. This particular... We're going to use this, but not with this particular setting. So next we're going to need to look for our pack map. So pack maps, that's another thing we're going to set to non-color. And for this shader, we're going to need to split it, separate color. You can use the separate XYZ as well. They're both float data currently, so it doesn't matter. And now you can see the green is gone. And actually, for Sarin, if you ever want to check the resolution of a texture, you can hit this little dropout, and you can see the resolution of it right there. So I am actually going to check. Okay, it's 2K. So Warframe, pretty much all of their characters have a max resolution of 2K resolution. They don't really go above that. So the next important thing is to look for in the shader file if it says... It looks like it does... Okay, here. So specular is metallic map. We want to make sure that we set that up appropriately what this says. So that says 0, so we need to make sure this is off. If we turned it on right now, you can see right here, it's getting rid of anything that's metallic because currently we are using a specular setup instead of a metallic setup. The next thing we are going to need is our emissive map, which is also non-color in these settings. And then we need to put that in there. And if you're using character fill, that's a lot more complex. People in the Warframe model resources Discord server can help you figure that out. Or you can just read the already set up documentation for that. So currently, we're missing something. We are missing our tint mask. So that is something we need to get. We are actually not missing it. It's right here. So what Warframe does on some of their older models is they actually pack their tint mask into the alpha channel of the pack map. So what it is this is actually a 4-quadrant texture that Warframe is capable of chunking out and overlaying on each other. But for what we're doing, we can't use that workflow. It's not compatible with what we're doing in Unity. So what we're going to need to do is open up this program, which you can find in the description. It's called Chainer. I absolutely love this program. You don't have to be familiar with it in any way, because in the link in the description, I will also have a file that if you can open with Chainer. And this is a node graph setup that will extract our tint map. So what we're going to need to do is go to our thing, and then we're going to need to find our pack map, and then we're going to drag and drop that into here. And then the way this pack map works is we're going to take what is half of this resolution and input that into here. And then we need to name it, so I like to just do copy name, and then paste it in here, delete pack map, and go _P. And then we can just hit run. And now that has saved our pack map. Now we need to do it for our helmet. So we're going to get the helmet. And I'll just put there. And then you can see it's giving us a warning because our resolution isn't correct. And that should be the correct resolution. Yep. And now we have our decompiled tint maps. We will need Chainer in a minute here, but we're done with that for now. So we can go back into Blender. Now we can get our tint map. And this particular shader has it decompiled, so we need to once again separate. And then we can close up all this. Move that up to line up just to be organized. And now we're ready to get into setting up some more of the settings. So I like to make sure these are all at 0 to start out with, and then just collapse them all. Base, that's already at 0.5. So now what we need to do is we need to find the colors. The colors are right here, and we are just going to enter those. I personally round. I don't put them in exact. Some of them are already rounded enough. I'm putting that in the wrong thing. Oops, that's not where that goes. There we go. So now 1. This is pretty much the same process for whatever shader you're using. You're just lining up whatever values are in this text file to whatever values are in the shader. And now we have all the colors for her base body. Next, we're going to need to do the emissions. So we're going to have to see what is the emissive value. It's 2 already. So then we need to sit in the high color. You don't have to do any of this part because this isn't going to apply to Unity very well. But it is good to give you a reference of how everything should look. And does she even have emissive? I can't see where there's any emissive value. She should. Did I do something wrong? Oh, I know what I forgot to do. Okay, I forgot to go over a step. Emission. You're gonna have to plug that in. And you're gonna have to set this to 1. I recommend actually setting this color to 0. Otherwise, when it imports to Unity, it's just gonna be bright white. There we go. Yeah, okay, that was my bad. There we go. Now we can see. So next, we are going to have to get the detail stuff. So what we need to scroll down and look for is which detail she is using. If you're using the character fill deferred, everything will be under a directory that you will be able to find. It will be a directory like this, and it will have like 4 layers of different tile maps, but for PBR fill defer, we have these atlases of details. So we need to, once again, do what we did with our tint map, but now this time for our detail map. So we're going to need to find the detail map that we're using, import it to there. We're going to delete our separate because this, we just need to, this works like the tint maps do, where it's 4 textures in 1. So we're just going to reconnect this to all here. And we're going to delete this. Scroll up here and put that there. Copy the name. You can name this whatever you want, but for simplicity, I just keep the name and do _1. And then plug it in. And then Control-Shift-D. And this one will be 2. And this one will be 3. And this one will be 4. And the mistake I did earlier was I used the wrong settings here. So remember, this is half of what the resolution of our texture is. And now everything is checked, and we can extract that. You can now close Chainer. We don't need to save unless you want to. And now, if I refresh Blender, all those are the correct resolution. So we're going to grab Detail Map 1. We're going to make sure it's non-color and just plug that in. We're just going to import all 4 of these, making sure they line up to secondary, primary, tertiary, and accents. Make sure they are all non-color. I have failed to do that, and it puts you back. Okay, so now we have all these in here. Now we're going to... Oop, I almost missed that. So now we need to set up our actual settings for these. So we're going to have to look under our text here. So first thing is Detail Map Diffuse. We're going to have to look at what that is. That is 1. Detail Map Diffuse range is 100. And then I'm pretty sure these are all going to be 0, but we'll double check. Where's the... Oh, I can't even find it right now. Sometimes it doesn't even extract because it's not even on the material, so I'm going to assume these are all 0. Normal map range, 20. Detail map roughness, 0. Detail map strength, 1. And then I can see that changed our actual model. And then we can collapse that. And now what we're going to need is, since we already decompiled the detail map, we cannot use the normal shader. This shader uses a particular UV tiling system, but we can no longer use that. So we're going to have to get the one from character filter by appending. So I need to find character filter. Character filter and node tree, and then we need a UV related thing. There we go. UV scale. Add UV scale. And then we have this. So the reason we're using this one and not the one that normally goes with PBR field deferred is because, once again, we already decompiled this, where it's no longer at list. So now these settings come from here. So it's all 12 and then 4. And we can collapse all that. And now our body material is set up. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select the edge of the shader, do Control I to invert, and then right click, copy, and then I'm going to go to helmet, delete this, paste with Control E, and then we're going to need to get all the stuff for our helmet. We don't have to set any of these other things up. If you're using character fill deferred, you might have a different base color per material. But for PBR fill, you usually don't have that. So yeah, now we're just gonna re-import everything for the helmet. Not re-import, just importing. And now we need to get the material file for the helmet. And now we need to look at what the tile settings are, because those usually do differ. And usually it's just half on the y-axis. like it is here. Okay, so now we have our Warframe fully shaded in Blender. I like to go under File, Clean Up, Purge Unused Data. You don't have to do that. I prefer to do that. And now we can save, and we are almost done with the Blender side. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get into baking. The first thing we're going to want to do when we're getting into baking is we're going to actually want to open up our Unity file, and we are going to want to set up the file we are going to be using. I personally am working through every Warframe using this shader, so I am going to... I've been numbering everything because of another system I'm using. So I'm going to name her, I think Saren is 13. I might change that later if it's wrong. So now I have my directory, and I can do show and explore, and I can just copy that. And what we're going to do is we are going to go under the shading tab again, and we are going to do this next phase is optional. You do not have to do this. I prefer to do this because it makes everything look a little bit better when it's in a baked lighting area in VRChat. So I'm going to do Shift A and then do color attribute. And then I'm going to select ambient occlusion. And now I have the ambient occlusion. I personally get a ramp after I do that, and then I B-spline and put the white at 0.75. The reason I do that is sometimes I feel like Warframe has a little bit more aggressive of an ambient occlusion than is needed for something like VRChat. I'll collapse all this up just for cleanliness. And then I'll copy that, and I'll put it on to here. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to look at your pack maps resolution, or simpler, you can duplicate it. And then once you duplicate it, you can hit this little tick, and now it's a unique texture, so you don't have to worry about that being overriding the actual texture. We're going to do that for the body. And you want to make sure that the ambient occlusion is showing and that this is selected. And then, once again, duplicate. And then I'm going to set this to closest for later. And then what we can do is we can go under our render settings, make sure we're under cycles. Go under bake. We're going to use emit. And we're going to set this to extend. And then I set this to 1K. And then we can hit bake, and it will bake both our materials. Ambient occlusion. Here's our helmet. So now we're going to do save as, and we are going to save this under our Unity directory that we just set up. You can see I rendered out what we need, but I have to do it again to show for the tutorial. So this is the helmet. And then this is the body. Now that that is saved, what we need to do is spawn in a plane for the rest of our baking. And we're going to start out with the body. We're going to select this, make sure it is closest, so that way the pixel resolution matches. And then we're going to duplicate it. So the reason we're having to bake this out is this is currently a specular setup. If this isn't checked, that means it's using specular, which most Warframes using PBR Fill Defer are still specular, which means it's not going to work with the shader we currently have set up. So we're going to get our metallic, and we're going to put that into red. We're going to plug our ambient occlusion into green, and then our roughness into blue. And then we're going to select this texture, and we're going to bake it. Make sure you do this on a plane so you don't lose anything. And it looks like I forgot to hit that little tick mark. There we go. Now we can save this as our pack map for Unity. And now we will select our helmet texture, do the same thing. Oops, there we go. Red, green, and blue. Bake that out. And then save that. And then we can delete all those when we're done using them. You don't have to. I do, because I use these files in both Blender and Unity. So having it nice and clean in both is helpful for when I'm doing different stuff. And then I like to do file, cleanup, purge unused data. And then we will save. So the reason we just saved before doing this next step is if you want to do anything else in Blender, we're about to null out all these colors, so you won't be able to retain the colors here. So we're going to go under shading now, and we're not going to save from this moment on in Blender. So we're going to add a plane, go under our body, and then we are going to set all of these to 0.5 RGB. So the reason what we are doing what we are about to do is, once again, it's because of this specular, and it's just data we need. We need a black and white diffuse of our texture. That is what we're getting here. This is so that the tint shader that we have in Unity has a basis. We're going to set that to closest again for accuracy. Duplicate that. And set this to a unique texture, and we are going to make sure it's sRGB this time. And then we're going to bake that out. And now that that's baked out, we are going to save that as _D for diffuse under there, under our Unity directory. Save image. Then we need to do the same for the helmet. Don't touch your base color. Whatever the shader has for the base color, use that, because the tint shader in Unity does not use the base color. That needs to be baked in with the diffuse map we're using. So we're going to bake that. We're going to save this in our Unity. And if you have color in your base color, use just use RGB, but this is all black and white data, so I'm just using black and white. And then we can close this without saving. So now we can delete our ambient occlusion because it's packed in there. Delete, yes. And then we're going to, I almost forgot to export our model, so we need to pull up our model. And this rig is already VRChat ready. So we are going to do, we're going to select everything, and we're going to do File, Export, FBX, and we need to go to where our model is, and then you can do Select Only. For this case, I don't have to. We are going to uncheck Animation. We're going to uncheck Add Leaf Bones under Armature. And then under Geometry, we are going to uncheck Apply Modifiers, and we are going to set Vertex Colors to None. If you are uploading for Quest, this is very important, the VRChat shaders for Quest automatically apply the vertex colors to the shader, and it can mess stuff up. So then we can export that. And we're going to leave Blender open, and we're going to go to our shader tab because pretty soon we are going to need our colors. So now we have everything in Unity, and here is our character model. So what we're going to do is go under animation, uncheck that. Under model, we can uncheck all of this. Don't need any of that. We're going to use legacy blend shape normals. VRChat, I'm pretty sure, requires that. And I like to set this to calculate and then set smoothing angle to 150. That just kind of makes the normals look a little bit better. 180, my bad. Now what we need to do is we need to correct the rig for VRChat. So we're going to go under humanoid, apply, and for some reason, Unity does not understand the bone names for Warframe. So we are going to have to go under configure, pose, reset, and then we need to find the index finger, and we have to manually assign this because currently it thinks the index finger is the thumb and the thumb is the index finger. So we need to correct this. We need to do it for the other hand. And now that that is done, we need to remember to go under pose and hit enforce T-pose. I've seen what happens if you don't do that, and it's unusable, weird, and just overall goofy, so make sure you hit that enforce T-pose. And then we can hit apply and done. So now our rig is connected. So now I'm going to drag her into our scene. I unbelievably had another recording mishap. So I'm back the following day to finish this up. So I showed you how to fix up the rig. You're going to need to extract your materials. Mine are already extracted because, once again, I messed up the rest of the recording session. So what we're going to need to do, now that we have our material and everything set up, is we're going to select both of our materials. And we're going to want to first turn on GPU instancing. This just is an optimization feature that can help us. And what we're going to do to first start up our material setup is we are going to go under here and go to Rero and go to Metallic Setup. So the reason we're using Metallic Setup right now is because the tint shader, like I covered in the beginning of the video, does not have UI. So the shader misses a couple of things, and I can't fix that right now. If I do, it will be fixed, and you'll have to be able to just... This part applies either way, because you have to do this either way. It just, we can't do it through the tint shader right now. So for Rero, it's best to have a fallback cube map. I already have one right here that I use. But what we need to do is also make sure our color is at full white. You can see it's pretty bright in my editor, but that doesn't matter. We'll fix all this up later. We want to make sure metallic and roughness are at full. We want to make sure emission is enabled. And we can leave it on baked. I prefer to set it to none because VRChat isn't going to use global illumination. And then we need to turn on advanced channel selection. And once that is enabled, we need to make sure occlusion is using green, roughness is using blue, and metallic is using red. This is because this is the setup we have for these textures, but whatever setup you're using is what you want to do. You can see I already imported 2 of our tile maps, which you would find right here in our files. So the key thing to note about all these tile maps that we're using, or detail normals, is you want to have the tile maps that you have right here, and the order will matter in a second. The thing to take away is you might not always have these detail maps if you're using something like character fill. So if you're using, if it says character fill right here, the entire shader workflow is a little different. The baking and stuff still applies, but these normals will come from a different location and they won't be as cleanly labeled. So the core thing to take away from this is, I'll cover that in a second, how we do that. But you want to import all of the detail normals that are being used that we assigned in Blender. And for Saren specifically, her secondary and primary details are the same, so I deleted them, and I'm just going to reuse the one texture. So that way we only have to call up one texture instead of 4 when 3 of the 4 are the same. And then her 4th texture is unique, so we are keeping that. So we are missing quite a few textures here. So what we need to import from our file is we need to find our emissive maps, our normal maps, and our tint maps. And we need to just select those and import them. Now that they're imported into Unity, I am personally going to rename them to match with the rest of the workflow I've set up. You don't have to do this, I just do this organization to make sure I can find everything later. Then we're going to select every texture we have. And you can see I already have set up a few settings, but we're going to need to set those up ourselves. Okay, so this is likely what your settings are set up to. So the first thing we're going to want to do is make sure we have MIP maps on, make sure we have MIP streaming on, and then we're going to switch this from box to this setting, which I can't pronounce. I always hit ignore PNG gamma just to make sure we don't have anything weird get embedded. And then I turn filter mode to trilinear. And this setting doesn't really matter for VRChat too much, but I always set it to max. You can see that basically it's saying there's already an override thing enabled. And then we're going to set the resize algorithm to bilinear. And then we're going to hit apply. So now all our textures have a general setup. And the way I do this, just to be better streamlined, is I'll turn off alpha source for all of them. But some of our textures actually need an alpha source, and that would be our tint maps. So then I'm just going to go under here and re-enable that. Another unique setting I set up for tint maps is I set their compression quality to low, because we don't need as high precision with them. And then we need to make sure our tint maps and our pack maps are all non-color. And then that should be, oh no, now we have to do our normal maps. So you're going to want to select all your normal maps and your detailed normal maps. And you are going to want to tell Unity they're a normal map, and then hit flip green channel. The reason you have to hit flip green channel is because Warframe uses DirectX while VRChat uses OpenGL. They're just different rendering APIs that have different standards. Luckily, Unity has this feature for us now, so we don't have to use Photoshop or anything. So the next thing I like to do, which once again you do not have to do this step, but I prefer to, is I am going to match the resolution down here to the max size. I don't think this does anything, but it's something I prefer to do just so I know kind of in here what everything's set to. Alright, now that all our compression settings are all set up, we can start with our material setup. So I'm going to start with the body. We already set up our parameters for the material, so what we need to do is drag in our diffuse texture to the albedo. And then we need to drag in our pack map to metallic, roughness, and occlusion. And then our normal map into normal map. as well as our emission map. So the reason I add ambient occlusion is because look how much shadowing that adds. And with Rero in particular, if a real-time light is hitting where there is occlusion, it will remove the occlusion. So if I turn off my lighting right now, you can see the entire model has occlusion now. But if I turn lighting back on and crevices like right here, the occlusion will disappear. So now we need to do the same thing for our helmet. And there's one thing I missed with the material setup for Rero. We're going to want to select both our materials and go to custom rim and make sure this is set to there. That way we don't have any rim lighting. Rim lighting can look good in engines like Unreal, but in Unity it does not look the best, so I recommend just disabling it. Now we can go under Rero, and we can go to Tint Setup. So you notice our model got a little bit brighter. That's because part of the tint map setup is kicking in. But right now we don't have a tint mask set up in there. So now we're going to have to assign our tint masks. And you can see when we put in the tint mask, it loads in a debug color so we can make sure that it's working. So next thing we need to do is select both of our materials and put in our tile maps. So since Sarin has the same tint map for both blue, green, and red, I deleted the blue and red, the blue and green ones, and just reused the same texture to save some memory. And then the fourth one is the same. So the key thing, I was trying to mention this earlier, but this is a better time to mention it. The key thing to take away from this is this lines up to here. This one lines up to here. This one lines up to this one, and this one lines up to this one. So even if you're using a different shader, the way they work with the tint map is they go down this way. So the next thing we're going to need is our actual colors. So you can open up your Blender file. Make sure it's not the one where we set everything to 0.5. And what we're going to do is go under our color and get the hex code. So we're just going to get the hex code for tint color 0, and we're going to put that in the channel red. Then we're going to get the one from tint color 1, put that into tint channel green, and get the one from tint color 2, put that into blue, and then get tint channel 3 and put that into alpha. So now we have all of our colors set up. And a key thing to note is you might be tempted to use these for the tiling. The way the shader is set up, it does not use these. You can zero all of these out and it won't matter. You can see it's still tiling it. That's because instead we are using these settings. I just set it up like that because that's the way I like to have it. So to get these settings, we're going to want to go to our body and get these numbers. So the way these numbers line up is if you go down in this list, that goes across in this list right here, and then the last 4 numbers go into this list below. So right here we have 12. So that means these are going to be set to 12. Then right here we have 12 again. So these are going to be 12. So then these 2 numbers go here. And then these numbers right here go in the last area. And then we know from looking at the helmet that these are all half. So we can just go to the helmet specifically and then type in the half number. And now I'm pretty sure we're done with our blend file, so we can go ahead and close that. And if you are using character fill, you will have the strengths for the tile maps, but here we do not have that. It works differently with the PBR fill. So basically it's set these to what you want. I prefer to set them all to 0.5 as a basis when using PBR fill. And then certain parts of it I like to have a little bit more intense or a little lower. Like I don't like how intense that is. So I'm going to set that to 0.25. Is that the correct channel? Oh wait, I'm just editing the helmet. Select both your materials. There we go. And then I can set this to 0.25. There we go. That looks a little softer. Pretty weak on the fingers. This probably I want to have a little bit more intense. 0.75. That area is quite intense, so I'll also set that to 0.25. This is just what you prefer for the character. Unless you're looking for one-to-one accuracy, just do what you want with that. A little tip, when uploading all these avatars, I have used the same eye position, and these are the numbers I use for my eye position. That's been pretty robust for me. And for you, you can use that at least as a basis. These tint colors you can animate with like FX menus. So you could even make like toggles for different color configurations that you want. The way I have it set up is for my public avatars, you can control the RGB of each of the sections right here. So pretty cool stuff you can do with it. I forgot to set up the emission color for Saren. I just kind of eyeball the emission color usually because Unity handles emissions quite differently than Blender does. So I just set it to something that looks about right. Now you're done with the Unity side of things and you're ready to upload. I'm not going to cover uploading in this tutorial just because it's already long enough, but here's what the final avatar and shader looks like in VRChat. If you have any questions, there's a bar at the very bottom of the description for frequently asked questions. That's going to be updated as I get frequently asked questions in Discord and from just people all around. So if you have a question, go see if it's down there. Hope you have a nice day, hope you enjoy the tutorial, and have fun.